There is a theft more dangerous than lies. It is the theft of your psychic space. When another person's unconscious begins to live inside your decisions, your emotions, your identity, and you don't even realize it's happening. This is the hidden mechanism of projection. Jung defined it not as something evil, but inevitable. We all do it. We project what we have not made peace with. We throw it on to others, so we don't have to hold it ourselves. Projection causes a kind of psychic blindness, a prison where the other ceases to be seen as they are and becomes used as a symbol of what is hidden in us. Carl Jung, the ego, and the unconscious. But here is the problem. When someone close to you is deeply unconscious of their shadow, they start to use you as a mirror. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but powerfully. You become the villain they refuse to admit lives inside. The savior they never dared to be. The traitor they imagine. The god they worship. All of it. A dream cast onto the wall of your soul. And worst of all, you start to play along. You start apologizing for things you didn't do. Trying to fix moods that aren't yours. Walking on emotional eggshells that are not part of your story. This is not empathy. This is energetic absorption, the toxic twin of compassion. And it is the first step in becoming enslaved to someone else's shadow. So here is your first act of rebellion. Begin to ask, is this feeling mine? Or have I been handed someone else's storm? Because self-awareness is not just spiritual. It is survival. And the moment you recognize you've been made into a character in someone else's unconscious narrative, you reclaim the power to walk out of the script. The empathist trap, when your compassion becomes a cage. There is a kind of person who does not scream to control you. They cry. They tremble. They bleed emotion. Not always in public. Not always in words. But always in a way that pulls your psyche inward. Making you believe their wounds are yours to heal. Their storms are yours to calm. Their broken mirrors are yours to piece back together with your own reflection. They are not evil, but they are dangerous. Jung called them unconscious personalities, those driven by complexes they themselves do not understand. They are ruled by emotional undercurrents too deep for language and too powerful to control. And so they project, not to hurt you, but to survive, to avoid meeting the abyss inside them. They assign roles to everyone around them. Villain, protector, betrayer, healer, God, failure, redeemer. And if you're not vigilant, you will become one of these roles. And slowly, you will forget who you truly are. What we do not confront in ourselves, we will encounter as fate. Carl Jung. But fate does not always feel like thunder. Sometimes it feels like love, like someone needing you, like emotional gravity pulling you into their orbit. You begin to care. You begin to stay. And slowly, you begin to believe their pain is your purpose. This is the trap of the unconscious manipulator. They do not demand your control. They consume your compassion. They say, I'm broken. And you think, I must be the healer. They say, you make me feel this way. And you think, I must be the problem. They say, don't leave me. And you think, I must abandon myself to stay. This is how your empathy becomes a leash. How your softness becomes a strategy used against you. Not because they are cruel, but because they are fragmented. Projection, if unrecognized, becomes destructive. Jung, the ego, and the unconscious. And destruction does not always look like war. Sometimes it looks like sacrifice. Your time, your peace, yourself. Have you noticed it? That relationship, that friendship, that space, where you always leave exhausted. Like you gave away pieces of yourself without consent. That's not love. That's psychic trespassing. And Jung warned us. The greatest dangers do not come from conscious perverts, but from unintegrated, unconscious ones. So here is the truth you've been avoiding. You are not the cure for someone else's refusal to look within. You are not responsible for holding together someone else's psyche. You are not a bandage. You are not a mirror. You are a sovereign soul, not a psychic sponge. But here's where it gets dangerous. You're not only being projected onto, you're also becoming addicted to the role. You start to feel meaningful through their suffering. You start to believe your worth is in your ability to endure, to fix, to absorb. And in doing so, you trade your power for a purpose that was never yours. This is the beginning of emotional enslavement. You will feel guilt when you try to leave. You will feel cruelty in your boundaries. But that's not truth. That's programming. Because the unconscious manipulator has mastered one thing, turning their chaos into your conscience. And unless you break free from that dynamic, you will spend your life sinking, believing you are saving someone, when really, you are abandoning yourself. You cease to be seen as a subject and are treated as a distorted reflection of the other's unconscious. Carl Jung. But here is the exit. Awareness. You must name what is nameless. You must confront what is silent. Ask yourself, am I constantly explaining myself? Do I feel guilty when I try to assert a boundary? Do I lose my peace around this person no matter how hard I try? Do I leave feeling confused, not because they said something, but because something entered me? That's not intuition failing you. That's your psyche sounding the alarm. And that's your moment to remember this. You are not cold for leaving. You are sovereign for remembering. Because the most dangerous thing about an unconscious manipulator is not that they trick you. It's that they teach you to betray yourself. So reclaim your center. Cut the cords, not with violence, but with clarity. And when they call you selfish, whisper, no, this is what self-respect sounds like. Because the price of psychic survival should not be your soul. The bearer of the mask, the death of the authentic self. Some people don't take your energy by force. They take it by imitation, by demanding that you mirror a version of them they themselves have never met, by dragging you into a theater where everyone must smile, nod, and behave. Even as the soul behind the performance slowly suffocates, this is the bearer of the persona. They don't scream. They don't manipulate. They perform. They charm. They wear the perfect face, say the right things, and live by the script of what is acceptable. But behind that flawless exterior, behind the curated self, there is a hollowness, a psychic vacuum where the real person was buried beneath expectations they were too afraid to betray. Carl Jung described the persona as what someone is not, but what he and others think he is. The ego and the unconscious. Let that settle. Because what you are dealing with is not deception. It's disconnection. These people live in fear of the unfiltered self. They've never met their chaos. They've never touched their rage. They've never held their pain with reverence. So they construct a persona so airtight, even they begin to believe it's who they are. And when you come close to their rawness, when you express something unscripted, a wild truth, a deep feeling, an authentic doubt, they flinch. Not because you did something wrong, but because you reminded them they no longer know who they are. The stronger the persona, the more repressed the shadow. Carl Jung. And what's repressed doesn't dissolve. It waits. Underneath the polished politeness, underneath the rehearsed humility, is a pressure building, a shadow fermenting, an identity fragmenting. And you become the casualty of their inner exile. At first, they'll love your authenticity. It feels refreshing to them. It's what they lost. But eventually, your realness becomes a threat. Your spontaneity becomes uncomfortable. Your depth becomes too heavy. Because it reveals everything they've buried. And in the face of your truth, they tighten their mask even more. Until one day, you realize you are not in a relationship. You are in a performance. An emotional stage play where deviation from the script means exile. And so, you start to shrink. You begin to tone yourself down. You laugh a little softer. You question your tears. You start playing a role that doesn't fit. Because the other refuses to live without the costume. And little by little, you begin to wear one too. This is the contagion of the persona. You begin to confuse acceptance with performance. You begin to believe that love must be earned through self-abandonment. And eventually, you forget the sound of your own voice. But this is where self-sovereignty must rise. Because you were not born to be digestible. You were not made to be aesthetically pleasing, emotionally manageable, or spiritually silent. You were not created to exist only in ways that soothe the insecurities of those who fear depth. You were meant to feel deeply, live loudly, and be unapologetically whole. Living in a symbolic bond is living in an illusion. Carl Jung. The persona will always offer you safety, but it will never offer you freedom. It is the smile that costs your soul. It is the peace that silences your truth. And here is the danger. The bearer of the persona doesn't just wear the mask for themselves. They expect you to play along. You must smile when they smile. You must praise what they pretend to be. You must validate their suppression by suppressing yourself too. If you step out of the role, you become too much, too emotional, too difficult. But in reality, you are just too awake to keep pretending. So here's the reclamation. Take off your own mask, not with rage, but with reverence. Because every time you sacrifice authenticity for approval, you betray your inner kingdom. Self-sovereignty means refusing to trade your soul for peace. It means choosing truth, even if your voice trembles. It means protecting your boundaries, even if it means breaking the script. And if they recoil, if they walk away, let them. That is not rejection. That is the mask falling away to reveal what was never real. Because true connection cannot happen through personas. It happens through presence, through rawness, through unfiltered, unmasked being. You are not here to act. You are here to awaken. And those who cannot meet you in your truth are not enemies. They are simply still asleep in their roles. Let them go. Let them perform. And choose instead to live. The real danger begins when the individual is hypnotized by the role they play, believing they are what others see. Carl Jung. Now, the descent grows deeper. Because when the mask is worn for too long, when the shadow is denied for too many years, something darker begins to rise from beneath. Not performance, not manipulation, but a pressure too great to contain. And this takes us to the next figure in our inner war. The owner of the repressed shadow, the one who lives polished on the surface, until they explode. The repressed shadow, when light becomes a lie. There is a kind of person who never raises their voice. They are calm, helpful, composed. Their life looks pristine, their actions refined. They pride themselves on being above chaos. But if you sit close enough, long enough, you will feel it. A pressure beneath the silence. A tremor in the restraint. An invisible scream waiting in the bones. This is the owner of the repressed shadow. The one who has mistaken control for healing. And in doing so, has become a stranger to themselves. The shadow is everything the individual refuses to recognize in themselves. And yet, it insists on being lived. Carl Jung, Ion. They do not destroy from malice. They destroy from suppression. From the ambition, they renamed humility. From the envy, they turned into virtue. From the rage, they buried in politeness. From the sexuality, they suffocated in shame. From the hunger for truth, they silenced with smiles. But nothing buried in the soul stays quiet forever. And so it begins. The ticking bomb behind every "I'm fine." The volcano simmering behind every "no worries." The resentment growing roots beneath every "it's okay." Until the day comes when they explode. Not softly, not rationally, but brutally, over something insignificant, unpredictable, or sometimes over you. Because what they never claimed in themselves must now find a place to live. And if they don't house it, you will. This is how you end up walking on eggshells with someone who never even raises their voice. How you end up feeling unsafe around the most polite person in the room. Because safety is not about behavior. It is about truth. And when someone hides from their truth long enough, they become a ticking psychic weapon. The stronger the persona, the more repressed the shadow. And the more repressed the shadow, the more brutal its manifestation. Carl Jung. Let's name it for what it is. Psychic dishonesty. Not the kind you can see, but the kind that poisons from beneath. The kind that turns your emotions into liabilities. The kind that forces you to be smaller, quieter, lighter. Because anything deep, raw, or real is a mirror they can't face. And this isn't about evil. This is about exile. They have exiled themselves from their own depth. And now, your depth feels like a threat. So they become rigid, moralistic, controlling. They preach self-discipline while rotting in resentment. They demand perfection while burying their pain. They claim the moral high ground while secretly trembling with the weight of their unspoken selves. And when you show emotion, they flinch. When you confess weakness, they withdraw. When you tell the truth, they either correct you, ignore you, or punish you with silence. Because in their world, vulnerability is dangerous. It's the thing they spend a lifetime trying to eliminate. They do not allow themselves to feel, and for that reason, they condemn those who do. The ego and the unconscious, Carl Jung. But here's the paradox. They're not actually strong. They are fragile beneath their control. And the fragility shows in their inability to face their own shadow. Because what you repress doesn't die. It mutates. It festers. It emerges as anxiety, judgment, coldness, or rage. And so you start to wonder, why is everything so tense around them? Why do I feel I must censor myself? Why do I tiptoe around their peace like it's made of glass? It's because their peace is made of glass, and your authenticity is the thing that might shatter it. This is how you become the emotional hostage of someone else's repression. And if you're not careful, you begin to repress yourself just to keep their mask intact. You call it respect. You call it love. You call it not wanting to trigger them. But what you're really doing is betraying your depth to protect their denial. This is not love. This is psychic imprisonment. And it is here that the most sacred boundary must be drawn. You are not responsible for managing the parts of someone they refuse to meet. You are not cruel for being real. You are not wrong for being emotional. You are not toxic for being whole. The shadow contains not only what is dark, but also your denied power, repressed strength, and disowned creativity. Carl Jung. You must stop shrinking your soul just to keep someone else comfortable in their prison. Because their prison will become your own. And eventually, you'll both forget what freedom tastes like. So what's the remedy? It is not confrontation. It is not condemnation. It is sovereign integrity. It is the courage to say, I will not shrink so you can stay asleep. It is the strength to hold your ground even when their silence turns cold. It is the dignity to feel your rage, own your need, and embody your truth. Even if it makes others uncomfortable. Because the price of repression is your life, and no performance of peace is worth the sacrifice of your wholeness. Now we walk into even darker territory. Not the silence of suppression, but the voice of moral control. The next figure doesn't just repress their own shadow. They weaponize morality to repress yours. They turn guilt into a leash. They use righteousness as a mask for power. And this is where the illusion of virtue becomes the architecture of control. The moral controller, when righteousness becomes a weapon. Not every executioner carries a sword. Some come wrapped in virtue, polished in politeness, armed not with fists, but with commandments. They don't scream. They don't explode. They correct. They correct your tone, your choices, your emotions, your desires, your way of being, all in the name of what is right. This is the moral controller. A person who confuses morality with domination, who disguises insecurity as virtue and repression as righteousness, not because they are evil, but because they have been taught that control equals purity. Not every executioner carries a sword. Some use crosses, rules, dogmas, and ready-made phrases, adapted from original script. These are the people who live according to rigid ideals and expect the same from you. They don't ask for your truth. They demand your conformity. And if you deviate from the rules, if you express emotion they don't approve of, if you desire something outside their code, they don't meet you with curiosity. They meet you with judgment. Polite, passive, deadly. They don't punish you with violence. They punish you with shame. They remind you of how much you've disappointed them. They compare you to an ideal you never agreed to. They whisper moral principles as weapons in your weakest moments. But here's the truth. They are not serving virtue. They are serving control. Often, this repression is fed by an illusion of superiority, by a rigid moral ideal that turns guilt into a tool of control. Inspired by Jungian thought, and their need to control others, comes from a terrifying lack of control within. They haven't integrated their shadow. They haven't made peace with their forbidden desires. They haven't confronted the fire in their own belly. So they put out the flames in others. They repress their chaos, then build a religion around your silence. And you begin to feel small under the weight of their goodness. Your truth disrupts their illusion of control, and your boundaries, your bold, sacred no, shatter the spell of moral manipulation. This is not rebellion. This is remembrance. This is the moment you remember you are not here to play the role of a good little citizen in someone else's emotional empire. You are here to become the ruler of your own interior kingdom, to stand on ground that is fully yours, to say, without shame, this is who I am, this is what I feel, and this is what I will no longer apologize for. Because when you stop begging for permission, you begin to walk a different path, one that requires courage, yes, but one that grants you back the most precious thing of all, your soul. But there is one final figure left, the most seductive of all, not the manipulator, not the mask wearer, not the suppressor or the judge, but the one who does it all in secret, silently, subtly, invisibly, the person who doesn't project. They consume. They don't explode. They extract. They take not your peace, but your very presence. They are the energetic thief, the most silent, the most dangerous, the most hidden threat to your sovereignty. The energetic thief. How to defend the invisible borders of your soul. Not every wound is made of words. Not every invasion wears a face. Sometimes, what is taken from you leaves no bruise, no scar, no trace at all, except the feeling that you are not quite yourself anymore. This is the work of the energetic thief. They don't scream. They don't project. They don't even do anything in the traditional sense. They simply exist near you. And suddenly, you are exhausted, unclear, off-center, emotionally tangled. You leave their presence, feeling like a fog has crept into your mind. And if you try to explain it, you sound irrational, because nothing happened, and yet everything did. The most destructive people are often charming, kind, even family members. While you try to protect yourself from the obvious villains, you are opening the doors of your mind to something infinitely more dangerous, the unconscious of others invading your own. Carl Jung, The Ego and the Unconscious. This is the domain of unseen dynamics, psychic bleeding, emotional osmosis, where someone's presence becomes a vacuum, pulling you in, piece by piece, until you forget what wholeness felt like. They don't always know they're doing it, but that doesn't make it less real. They drain you with their stories. They hook you with their pain. They anchor themselves into your empathy and make you responsible for holding them up. And because you're kind, you stay, you listen, you care, you give, until there's nothing left to give. And still, they reach. This is not intimacy. It is consumption. This is not emotional connection. It is energetic possession. You begin to lose your clarity. Your decisions start bending to their moods. You hesitate to say what you feel. You feel anxious in their silence and guilty in their suffering. You become a vessel for their unprocessed life. And this is the danger, because it's not what they take. It's what you slowly surrender. When someone is blind to their own darkness, that shadow seeks a host. And often, that host is you. Carl Jung, The Ego and the Unconscious. The energetic thief doesn't manipulate with intention. They pull by nature. Their soul is like an open circuit. They can't contain themselves. So they spill into you. They speak in emotional riddles. They exhale sadness, then blame the air for being heavy. They flood you with what they won't feel, until your intuition drowns beneath it. And suddenly, your thoughts are not fully your own. Your nervous system doesn't feel like it belongs to you. Your body is in the room, but your soul has wandered into theirs. This is why boundaries are not just behavioral. They are energetic, psychological, spiritual. You cannot protect your soul if you are only guarding your actions. You must learn to seal your presence, to reclaim the sacred membrane of your attention, to know what is you and what is not, because not all intrusions knock on your door. Some enter through the softest openings. Your compassion, your guilt, your desire to help. But understand this. Your empathy is not a portal. It is a gift, and gifts must be chosen. not taken. To protect your energetic field, you must develop something deeper than boundaries. You must cultivate self-containment. It is the art of sitting in your own energy, with full presence, without leaking it into others, or absorbing theirs into you. This is not distance. This is dignity. It's what Jung called individuation, not separation from others, but wholeness within yourself. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. So ask yourself, where do I lose my center? With whom do I feel foggy, unclear, or drained? When did I last feel mine? And if the answer frightens you, don't panic. Reclaiming yourself doesn't require rage. It requires remembrance. You remember that you are not here to carry what others refuse to hold. You remember that you have a right to clarity. You remember that love without sovereignty is not love. It is servitude. You do not need to save anyone to be worthy. You do not need to heal others to be good. You do not need to dissolve into anyone's psychic pain to prove you care. The unconscious manipulator does not invade your life violently. They enter through the gap of your empathy. So what now? Now, you protect your light. You learn the sacred word, no. You speak your truth. Even if your voice shakes, you step back. Even if they guilt you, you stop explaining. Even if they don't understand. Because your soul is not a marketplace. It is a sanctuary. Let them think what they will. Let them call it cold, selfish, cruel. It is not. It is sovereign. And in that sovereignty, you will discover something sacred. Your energy begins to return. Your intuition becomes sharp. Your clarity becomes clean. Your truth becomes unmuddied. And your presence, at last, becomes yours again. This is not just healing. It is resurrection. Because the moment you stop giving your soul away, you begin the journey of coming home. And the world can only meet you as deeply as you have returned to yourself. You are not a mirror. You are not a savior. You are not a symbol. You are you. And that is enough. Final words. Now you see them. The unconscious manipulator. The bearer of the persona. The repressor of the shadow. The moral controller. The energetic thief. They are not villains. They are unawakened. But now, you are not. And once your eyes have opened, you cannot close them again. You no longer walk through life unguarded. You no longer give your light to hands that have not earned it. You no longer let guilt disguise itself as love. You walk, now, with something rare. Sovereign silence. Boundaried light. Untouchable truth. Because you are no longer the prey of unconscious energy. You are now the ruler of your own inner kingdom. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Take your fate back. Take your energy back. Take yourself back. The quiet crown is yours to wear. And from here on, no one gets to enter your soul without your permission.